to the Ed Collab Gathering number 6. We have a couple of really great speakers. Today, JoEllen, McCarthy, and Jeff Anderson are going to present The Power of Mentors, Sentence, Grammar, Entire Books, and Everything in Between. The hashtag for this session is the Ed Collab Gathering number 6. And here we are, turning it over to JoEllen and Jeff Anderson. Take it away.
Thank you, Camilla. Nice to see you here. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. I see your face. Okay, I'm so excited to be able to participate in today's gathering and to have Jeff, who is a wonderful mentor, author, and friend, and he's here to speak about his work and what he is doing in the craft of grammar, which has been so innovative and wonderful and amazing because it focuses on kids and what do kids know and need to know and the whole inquiry and discovery process. Right now, I see Camilla. I think maybe, do you see the yellow Ed Collab Gathering on your screen? I think we have to stop share for Camilla. Sorry about that. There we go. And Jeff and I are going to talk about the power of mentors and everything in between, because this year, Jeff has actually joined the world of middle grade author as well. So we're very excited about having Jeff talk to us about that and talk to us about the roles mentors have played in his life. So Jeff, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks to Chris and Camilla and everybody who set this up, and thanks for all your hard work, JoEllen, to make this conversation happen.
I'm excited. I love that when we were tweeting earlier in the week and I said, oh, people will have to join for the grammar guru of Jeff Anderson, and you said, you know, I kind of like grammar enthusiast a little better, and I love it. I think it's a perfect choice of words to describe you because you are so enthusiastic. And it's interesting because so many people tend to be grammar phobes, and you even talk about that in one of your first books in the book Mechanically Inclined, that there's like a dirty little secret that some people just don't teach grammar because they're afraid of it. So I know that your work has been so meaningful in getting an opportunity to really invite kids to notice and to be focused on the intentional decisions that authors make, which is why I think it's so important that we're talking about the power of mentors, because it's not the books, it's the authors and the decisions that authors make, and then we give kids the opportunity to think and read like writers. So I'm really excited to learn from you and with you again today, Jeff.
Well, I'm excited too. Yeah, definitely. There were points in my career where I integrated grammar so well nobody could see it, and that's not what they meant. And so I'm glad to be able to share a little bit about how I came to understand grammar along with the kids and learning from the authors that were all around me, because that's really, I think, where it starts. Teaching grammar, as they say, the right way, meaning looking at powerful writing and powerful mentors that have really changed me as a writer too, right along with the kids.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have slides also that show and demonstrate some of Jeff's work in and his wonderful website. If you're not familiar with his wonderful website, which you should go to writeguy.net, and there's a showcase on there about some of his work with regards to the professional resources that he's done, like Mechanically Inclined and Everyday Editing and 10 Things Every Writer Needs to Know, along with Revision Decisions. So if you're not familiar with that, there's so many great resources that you can get to by visiting that website, and thank you, Jeff, for giving us those resources. So today also what we're going to talk about is the mentors in your life, and I was curious because that's such an important piece. Who are some of the mentors that have influenced you in your work?
Well, the first person that I'd have to say is Harry Noden, who wrote the book Image Grammar. I give a shout out to him in my acknowledgments because, I do believe we have to acknowledge whose shoulders we stand on, because we all do. We all lift each other up, and I feel like Harry Noden was the most influential to me because he had this idea of brushstrokes, and he was just looking at writing and seeing what it does, and it just struck me. It's just the preface of his book Image Grammar actually changed me as a teacher of grammar, and I started playing with it just with show, don't tell, and all these things, and then I started just realizing all these grammatical things, they really seemed kind of impossible, like a list of rules I would never be able to remember, were actually just patterns that authors used all the time. And that just opened up the world to me. So I say in Mechanically Inclined, and I mean it, I would never have written a book about teaching grammar had it not been for Harry Noden. In fact, my first editor was like, because I think I had done it on my book Mechanically Inclined, I had handed it in as, writing workshop in urban schools or something like that. And she was like, no. She says, you do this stuff with grammar that's really cool. And I go, I don't like to call it grammar. And I like to call it craft. And she was like, oh, that's it. So Brenda Power, I have to give her a shout out too for actually kind of finding a piece of my message that needed to get out there, out of the whole of everything, because it is about Writer's Workshop, but it's also about how do you not skip grammar in Writer's Workshop? How do you not just say you're integrating it and kind of scattershotly cover a couple of things a few times? How do you really systematically get that in there in a way that still kind of combines with the Writing Workshop ideals?
I love that you say that because it's all those intentional decisions, and it's also the play and the experience that kids have in playing with the text as readers and as writers. And I think one of the things that I love that you say is how the writer's notebook is a playground for experimentation. And I think that's so important that we're not looking at a set of rules, but we're looking at possibilities and trying to have kids look and see, and the patterns. Like, that was for me such an eye-opening experience when I started to use your work and to really, like you said, standing on the shoulders of your work, which I'm so appreciative of, having the opportunity to stop and to notice in the same way that we would be admiring the craft of a writer, but looking at the intentional decisions and the patterns with sentence and mechanics that authors have used, and then saying to kids, okay, now let's play with this and let's try it, and how revision is also a part of that play. So just really powerful mindset, life-changing kind of work that you have done and that we continue to build on. So I really thank you for all of that. It's amazing.
Well, that idea of fusing craft and mechanics, like there's composition and there's comprehension, and the conventions are the bridge that connects the two. And it's just, it gets exciting that way. It becomes about the special effects devices of writing rather than I've got to learn all these rules and I'm just going to be wrong. So yeah, possibility, not limitation. Good.
Absolutely. I know.
Part of my message.
yeah, and and one of the things you said when we were talking and planning some of this, and I wrote it down because it was so powerful. You said, instead of a set of nevers, grammar is a set of possibilities, and I think that that's so huge, and making it part of our work. So thank you. I also have a slide in here that I want to just pull up for a second, which, if I share correctly, and I apologize, bear with me for one moment. Where we talked a little bit about, how you're now transitioning into your work with Zach Dela Cruz, and I love that, people are asking, there's a buzz, like, who is Zach Dela Cruz? And one of the things that you had shared in your book trailer is, talking about how all the things that make us come together are stronger than the things that pull us apart. So can you talk a little bit with us about how this is a different shift for you in your work with your introduction into the middle grade world?
Well, it's kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Trying to create an environment where I'm using sentences and I'm using, grammar moves to express my ideas. So instead of just writing books about teaching grammar, I'm really going in there and seeing how that craft and mechanics emerge. And I know so much more about how to intentionally do things that I didn't know before because of the learning I did with kids. Because we would look at a great sentence from an author and we talk about what did the author do, how did he or she do that, and I mean, great leads, everything, all those crafts and mechanics work together and come together. So I get a chance, humbly, to try and reach for something like a Beverly Cleary, or the book that I enjoyed, my Henry Huggins books that I enjoyed, for today's kids, and pull in some of that stuff. I mean, humbly, I'm not saying I'm Beverly Cleary. I would love to be Beverly Cleary, but she was a mentor too, because who made me fall in love with reading with Ribsy? Who made me enjoy reading and have a passion for it? And so, to me, to get to kind of play with the grammar and really actually violate some of the rules of grammar that you have to do in the books. Because, sometimes teachers tell me, like, I'm so angry. These writers, they're writing for children, and, they put sentence fragments in the book. And I think about that, and I think, well, you know, if you read any books, any articles, there are sentence fragments that are intentional. Yeah, but they shouldn't have any at all. But that's part of the beauty of writing. That's actual sentence variety. And I think it's fun. You're going back to that idea of possibilities instead of nevers. How do you create rhythm? And we don't want to take away all the rhetorical devices saying that that's the wrong thing to do. We want to do, I love what Katie Wood Ray says, why would we teach kids to do something that real writers don't do? There's so much that they need to know about writing, we shouldn't be making up rules. You know, the whole thing about do start sentence with and or but. I mean, there are classrooms across the United States of America where teachers tell kids that they cannot ever start a sentence with and or but. And the truth is, when a kid reads a book, he or she sees right away that, well, you can. And I think what the teacher's trying to teach is that you rarely start a sentence with and or but instead, to simplify, we're saying never. And we have to be really careful of that because that's taking away choices and that's taking away their ability to think and mediate the decision. I understand what the problem is, and usually the problem why kids are told to never start a sentence with and or but is because they say and then, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then over and over again. But it's not about you never do that, it's rarely do it and how it takes the power out of it when you do something all the time. And so I think, you know, there are other ways to deal with that. I know I tell the story in my workshops of just when the little girl comes up to me with their and then paper, which whether you teach first grade or sixth grade or even 11th grade, you every once in a while get these and then papers. And how do you deal with that is you give them a marker and say, go back and circle all your and thens. And then they come back to you and they realize they have too many. They'll tell you they have too many because they can visually see it. And then you help them kind of work through how to take out about half of them, and you've made the point. But when we say never, we're saying, oh, honey, you know, you can't really think for yourself, so I'm going to think for you. And when you're a real writer, you can do things. But that's the whole shift to me is they are real writers. Those first graders are real writers, and they're published when we put their work up on the bulletin board.
Absolutely.
Oh, I just ran my and or but soapbox. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I think it's so important because you know what, you hit the really key issue, which is, you know, getting to the why we do what we do, and that's what creates learners. When kids can internalize those things and make those decisions and be thoughtful and reflective, and that's so important in our work as educators because then we're transferring the learning over to the kids. So if you have an and or then, you need to think about why it's there and what its purpose is and does it work. And if it doesn't, that's okay too because that's all part of the learning process. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's just important. And you know, you mentioned Katie Wood Ray, and of course she's a huge mentor to so many of us in her work, and you know, immersing kids in understanding all of that and thinking about noticings and the noticings charts, and okay, so what is this here and why would we do it and how can we try it on our own, which is so important in giving that power to the kids. So I just love, like you said, that bridge of all of this coming together. And now I'm excited for you too because you've created this series that is so wonderful and humorous and fun, and you know, it leaves kids wanting more. And so we do have, and I'll pull up on the slide again, if you don't have this video link to show Jeff talking a little bit about the book and about his experience, and a little book trailer for you. And did I show that okay? Is it up on screen, Jeff? We're
yes.
All good? Okay, terrific. And so you can click on the link if people want to know more, want to hear more about Zach Dela Cruz. And we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, meeting Zach and some of the characters in his book as well. As a matter of fact, we even have one slide which shows all of the characters. And this is something that Jeff and I had talked about, which was kind of, again, an intentional decision for you to think about maybe having some characters that were a little bit more diverse in this book. And do you want to talk a little bit about some of that? I know everything you do is so intentional. Would you mind speaking to us a little bit about that?
Well, as a teacher of over 20 years, I worked with a diverse set of kids, diverse economically, diverse racially, diverse. And I had them tell me sometimes as a sixth grade teacher that they didn't see enough books that were about them. And they noticed that, and I really thought a lot about that. But I also intentionally thought about how I was not going to make it about diversity,
right,
but make it about kids living middle grade lives, dealing with middle grade problems. You know, there doesn't have to be death. I'm not saying books about death are wrong. I just think there are lots of good books about death and struggle and hardship. I think those everyday hardships need to be seen the things that go on in middle school, the worries about being different, the worries about all those things need to be with kids of all different colors and all different races and coming together and like the real world.
Absolutely.
I wasn't seeing that, and I was really proud of Sterling Publishers for publishing it, because this was before the We Need Diverse Books movement, because it takes so long for a book to get published. So I'm excited to at least make some contribution that way to a book where kids can see a mirror of themselves. So thank you for noticing that, because it's a big deal to me for my teaching that I wanted all my kids to have a mirror of themselves.
Yeah, I think it's so important. Kids need, books as doors and mirrors and windows. So I think that's a wonderful piece. And as you said, it's not what the book is about, but it's just that there's a layer in there that exists, which is wonderful. One of the things that I pulled to share, too, was a quote that you had said in 10 Things Every Writer Needs to Know. And I think this is such a great quote. I just want to pull this up for a second, because you talked about how, writing is a transaction between writers and readers. And, it's that opportunity through any book to get kids to be able to be heard or to connect. And I think that's such a powerful message in your work and in this book. So I thank you for that. And I want to talk a little bit about the book. We actually have the picture right here of the first page and some of the craft decisions that you made. So could you share this with us a little bit? I'll leave this slide up for a minute just so you can talk about this
Okay.
and maybe read it to us. Would that be okay, Jeff?
Sure.
Thanks.
Oh, okay. The slide's not up yet.
Oh, it's not? I'm so sorry. I thought it was.
Okay.
Oops. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Yeah, I thought it was up the whole time. I apologize.
There we go.
You got it. All right. Sorry, Jeff.
A typhoon spray of spit, a stupid assembly, and my big mouth. That's all it took to ruin my life. So we'll just stop right there, because here we are right away, that idea, and I did worry about this, like that there might be some teacher somewhere that reads that and goes, it's starting with 3 sentence fragments. How could he do that? But the point is I don't stay with those, because I didn't have to say there was a typhoon spray of spit, a stupid assembly was going to happen, and my big mouth was going to open. I needed the emphasis. I needed it to click like that. And I love that we have all these options in our language. And kids don't necessarily know, like, well, I chose to use an intentional fragment here. But they will use fragments effectively. And if we tell them you can never, ever do that, then they won't. And that could be in a lead. But it's just, again, it's rarely, because that's what you'll notice in craft and you notice in the books when writers do it. I mean, every once in a while, a writer will even do a run-on sentence. And they'll do it for the purpose of making somebody sound out of breath or out of control, but they don't just keep doing it, because then it loses its effect. And every grammatical choice has an effect, whether it's the choice of using a participle or not. That has an effect. The choice, but I think they're not always going to be able to name it. And thank goodness, higher order testing that we're supposed to be doing and the high-level thinking that we're supposed to be doing for the new kinds of tests that we're supposed to be taking never ask kids to identify exactly the name of it. It isn't about the name, it's about the use. And even the Common Core and the Texas State Standards, the emphasis is on use and understanding of how to use it and what it's for, not being able to go back and label it.
Exactly.
And so I think that's exciting. I fear sometimes people don't read that in between the line, but find those words, use and understand. It's all about application. Those tests are about application. And if we teach a kid how to read well and notice what he's reading and notice what she's reading and flowing that into their text, they're going to be fine. But sometimes we got to pull out a couple of sentences and really look at them and really see the pattern. So that's how we learn.
Absolutely.
And once we see the pattern of a sentence, whether it's a serial comma or a compound sentence, any of these things that we know are patterns of power that the kids have to know. When we pull out a sentence from, let's say, Turtle in Paradise, the opening line, she has a great, sentence, a compound sentence. So we look at that, but then at the same time, we're getting them excited, like Penny was talking about this morning, getting them excited about going and checking out Turtle in Paradise by Jennifer Holm, because yeah, it was a compound sentence, but it was an exciting, what is it? Everyone thinks children are as sweet as not Nilla wafers. What are those things? Everyone thinks children are as sweet as Necco wafers, comma, but I've lived long enough to know the truth. They see that, it makes them laugh, and then we can talk about, well, and it's fun because you get the opportunity to say, kids, what is that? When they'll notice that it's joined with a butt, and you get to say, what's that butt doing? I mean, what other job do you get to ask the kids, your fifth graders, what is that butt doing? And they think that's funny, but we can talk about the actual function of the coordinating conjunction. Or the fanboy connecting the two sentences, and they say, well, it's making it say that it's going against, the two ideas are going against each other. That's the purpose of a compound sentence. It's not so because we need to put a comma and a fanboy in between. We use them for a reason, and it's in that craft that the understanding and the use comes out that will help them score well on these higher order tests that they're supposed to be taking. And then we teach them to imitate those things and try them out on their own in small, bite-sized, digestible chunks. And then we share those things, and we learn through compare and contrast. And sometimes we're not perfect with it. We're not always going to be 100% successful. But I love, there's like an Oliver Wendell Holmes quote. It's not so much where we stand in this world, but in what direction we're moving. And we're moving toward correctness. The expectation of 100% correctness for a first grader or a third grader, for me, is ridiculous. We have to, it's something to strive for, but we didn't fail when we didn't get there. It's any movement that we inch toward and try out new things. Because what happens is when it's about don't do this and don't do that and I'm tired of seeing you forget to do this, it becomes fearful, and so you want to only stick with what you know, and you become kind of tied up and you don't take the risks. And grammar is all about the risks, about trying something new. So we've got to create an environment where that's okay.
I love that you said that. I'm trying to actually tweet as you're saying that. Grammar's all about the risks because it's so true and it's so important. And I've seen kids, as my work as a staff developer, who will stop. They will literally stop writing and be like, oh, no, I can't do that. Because now they're afraid. They're thinking about, and it tells you something about, their opportunities in that classroom, about being able to feel safe and take a risk. And so, the conversation always goes back to letting kids know that it's better to try. And some kids will stop. And with anything, with conventions, mechanics, you see it often for kids who are maybe a little bit more inhibited for that risk experience. And so, that's a great conversation then to think about where we're going next in our work, in the classroom, and what opportunities need to exist for kids to feel safe. Like you talk about in one of your books how, again, the writer's notebook, it's a safe place for them to spill themselves and their thoughts onto the page. And we desperately need that opportunity for kids to have the opportunity to just write and to have, play time with their writing and giving them choice and their voice to come out. And when kids stop and say no, I don't want to do that, it's really that fear factor, as you said, and we need to take that away. I love that. I'm going to tweet as we're talking because that's such a great line, a Jeffism. Grammar is all about taking the risks.
It is, and then here's my writer's notebook, and this is the truth. I take risk in here. I love using my end papers because I can put all sorts of ideas, but it's a big old mess, and oops, see, something's falling out, because I have everything in here. It becomes this containment zone, a safe place to play, and I think the kids need to feel that grammar is play. Grammar is playing with meaning. Grammar is finding a new way to express yourself and a deeper way to express yourself. I mean, every grammatical function has detail at its heart. Every grammatical choice you make gives a detail to your reader that they may or may not get. And then what's really cool, though, what I love about the imitation, what I love about the noticings, is how it transfers into their reading lives. Because then it changes their comprehension, and it changes the way they look at text, because they're like, oh, why did he do that? We learned that colons introduce a list, but here this isn't a list. This is a sentence. Hey, teacher, why is he doing? And then, then you've got a new opportunity to teach. Instead of, like a textbook often does, it just kind of front loads everything all at once, and you're just supposed to know it. It's kind of that's another thing I learned from Harry Noden. One more shout out, Shoulders Who I Stand On, was this idea, you could teach the participle as an ing verb, and there would be some grammarians that would I know I talked to this one lady that's a grammarian, and she's like, well, I just couldn't read the rest of the book because he called it an ing verb, and it's not a verb, it's a verbal. And what's interesting to me, I love that he had the guts to do that, because grammarians can get kind of mean about stuff like that. I mean, like, she didn't want to listen to him anymore because I'm like, but if you look in the Chicago Manual of Style and you look under verb, that's where participle is. Verbal, verb, what does that really matter? Kids can understand you about how to use an ing verb. And then she's, yeah, but it's not just an ing verb, it's an en verb. And I'm like, yeah, the past participle, but he lets them figure that out over time instead of giving them to them all at once, and it just goes whoosh. Or it becomes the Peanuts teacher. That's what I always say. You know, when we want our kids to know so much about grammar that when we get a little bit of confidence about it, if we have any, we start talking like the Peanuts teacher. Wah, 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 wah. Because it's just too much to actually process and take in. It's a little bite-sized, digestible chunks. That's why the invitation to notice often starts off with just one sentence or a couple of sentences together so that we can see in a digestible, bite-sized chunk what's going on here. And we can cut away all the noise and zoom in on a pattern of power that I know my kids need to know. But like I said, I'll just end on that again. The beautiful thing is how that transfers into their reading lives, which is what we want in balanced literacy, for them to see that the reflection of reading and writing, you know, they're mirrors of each other. They're not separate. And grammar is the gum that sticks the pages together. Ooh, that was nice.
Oh, that's a good. Write that one down. I was actually thinking, as you were saying, I wanted to go back to that too because I just finished Terry Thompson's new book, Construction Zone, and what I love in there is Donnellan talking in the foreword about how one line she says, "It is possible for us to be good teachers without a script, and our students need meaningful and empowering literacy experiences." And I think that's so true for every area, but specifically in this area because so many times, you go somewhere and people will be like, "Oh well, we have to look into this spelling, workbook or this, or gosh forbid." I love that you always use the term, which I probably can't say, but when you have work and you don't say sheets, you say something else at the end of it. You put a little instead of yeah, and so it's like empowering experiences for teachers and for students, and that's what it all goes back to, and it's really important work. So I know I can't say enough about Jeff's professional resources, and definitely go to rightguy.net to check out some of his books if you don't already have them, although who could be on here possibly doesn't already have them? We're talking to literacy geeks and very nerdy people, right? So I'm sure they all do, and there's just always something to go back to and to learn from with you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the patterns of power that you mentioned, because I put some examples in here too from Zach, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I want to just show you on the screen real quickly one of the slides that we put together. We were talking about how you can go from simple patterns of power to more complex patterns of power. And you had mentioned about, getting kids' attention. So, here's something simple, this is from some student work with poetry. Is that screen up and showing okay?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, awesome. And then you talk about getting their attention, and one of my favorite things that you do, and you do so well, is talking about the awubis and that pattern of power. And you've got to give us one, Jeff, just one. Say it like you always say it. Come on, can we get an awubis from you?
Cover your ears if you're not.
All right, I'm putting you back on the screen because you need to see Jeff to do this. This is not about you need to see Jeff live and in person. Get ready, folks. Here we go.
Awubis. Awubis. Do it with me. Do it in your pajamas out there. Awubis. Now, because if I tell, you can put the awubis back up because they're like,
sure, absolutely.
But if I tell kids I'm going to talk about subordinating conjunctions, they're going to, pass out and fall asleep. We don't want them to feel like grammar is a bunch of terms that I can't do. We want them to feel like they're things that serve as functions. Like we teach them most of the time, if a sentence starts with an awubis word, you're probably going to need a comma. And that is a simple startup. And then we can later call it subordinating conjunctions if you just really die and feel like you have to. But they did it with the awubis. Even though it's not every single subordinating conjunction, I mean, why would you want to show them every single subordinating conjunction to start with? These are the main ones that they use in their language. I mean, first graders, second graders use these, so we can teach them about one of the number one errors college freshmen make is punctuating an introductory element. And I like the way they call it punctuating an introductory element and not an introductory clause, because it can be an introductory phrase, it can be an introductory clause, and it can be an introductory word. And in this case, it's an introductory clause, but why not just have it the power of an introductory word, phrase, or clause needs to be punctuated if it's not a complete sentence, set off with a comma. I mean, the kids aren't getting that by 12th grade. And if we get them noticing that in 4th and 5th grade and seeing that and imitating that and trying that out and seeing it as a reader in a more conscious way, because we know what happens. You know, those of you that have been in my workshop, we talk about that reticular activating system. Once we've studied it, once we've had that conversation about that pattern of power, then you start seeing it everywhere. It jumps out at you because you've given it an importance. And in a book called 2, 3, let's see if I can get it. I can't remember the name of it right now, but he talks about, he's a brain expert, and he talks about the only way, it's, I'm sorry, I can't get it.
That's okay, don't worry.
No, it's a more a book that's out there that's not an educational book, actually.
Okay.
And I'll tweet it later because I know it's yellow and I can't do it right now. But anyway, he says that we're unconscious of so many things in this world, and our brain is totally overwhelmed by stimulus all the time, and I think we all can relate to that. He says there's one way. There's one way you can bring something to your conscious level of attention, and that's that we have a conversation about it. And this neurologist, he's from Baylor College of Medicine. I know that much. See, I know all these things, and I know the book is yellow. But I think that's beautiful because that really gets you to see the idea. It's not about the mentors. It's not about the mentor sentence or the mentor text. It's about the conversation around it that raises the kid's conscious level of awareness of what those things are doing to create meaning. And maybe I'll come up with his name before the end if I'm not trying to think about it.
Don't worry about it, because these sessions are archived, so we can go back and look later, and we can send out information and other things. But I think it's so true what you say, because it's the conversations, and it's also that reciprocity with reading and writing, that whole bridge and fluency. So kids start to see it and notice, and then they're speaking that way, and they're hearing it, and that, you know, as they're reading, and their fluency, you know, grows because of that experience, right? Like you said, the example this morning that Penny gave, you know, feeling that run-on sentence and its purpose and how it changes the way that it should sound and how it should feel as a reader. And that's so important for kids to notice that as well. And then those conversations just, you know, translate into, again, independent applications. So it's good stuff.
It's David Eagleman.
Oh, Eagleman. Okay, so I'll tweet that up.
David Eagleman.
Okay.
I got half of it.
Okay. So I'll tweet that out also. And I know we were talking a little bit about some more patterns, and if it's okay, I can put a few up just for others who may not be as familiar. Like we talked about how, you know, mentor sentences, I love what you just said, that mentor sentences are everywhere. And so, you know, Jeff shared this with me the other day and said, oh, we have to put this up when we have the session because it's such a great example. Is this up on the screen now, Jeff?
Yeah, I think you just have to click on it because it's on the.
Oops. Sorry.
It's on the like navigator. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No, it's. I mean, you can see that. You can see it. You can see it. So I'll talk about it.
Thank you.
It was this great. Oh, there you. Oh, there you go. There's this great post on Twitter from Chuck Sambuca. Oh, well, I don't know how to say his name. Chuck. And Chuck is a really nice guy. He does the children's writers, the Writer's Digest, children's writers and illustrators guidebook. If you want to write children's books, it tells you about the publishers and all that. Anyway, I love this quote he put up. If I can't bring my book, comma, I'm not going. That's an all-woobus. And I thought we can really relate to that because the if, it's also conditional. It's a lot of things. That's an 8th grade Common Core goal. If I can't bring my notebook, if I can't bring my book, comma, then I'm not going. We can all relate to that, but that's kind of a sentence, and that shows a purpose. It's saying if this happens then, and the kids will even say that. It's an if-then sentence. And they start thinking about those patterns of power. They see it right away.
That's great. So I hope it went up before. I apologize. We were having a little technical difficulty. But going back to that, I have another page from Zach, and one of the things that I learned from you, and I had to laugh because we talked about being a sentence stalker and how important that is when we are, you know, looking at others' work. And so with being a sentence stalker, how about if we do a little sentence stalking with this page right here, if I can get it up in a moment. Sorry.
It sounds so creepy now, doesn't it? When I first wrote it, it didn't sound as creepy as now. Sentence stalker sounds creepy. It's like you're driving past the sentence over and over again and sitting outside, looking through the windows to see the sentence. No, it's the idea is that we kind of just read and we find stuff. We stumble across things as we read. Yes, keep a list. Know what your patterns of power are for your grade level. And as you read, you will come across them. It's like that Field of Dreams thing. If you build it, he will come. If you write it down, you will find it. If you write down the pattern of power you want to find, you will find it. You can't look in a certain book for a pattern of power. You just have to know what your pattern of power is, and it will find you. So I think like you can play with things like using, like in the second paragraph, you can play with this idea of using hyphens in between adjectives to words. So like here, anyway, it had been a take a jar with you kind of day. I'm speaking of peanut butter earlier because I'm a little stressed out in the book as Zach told. Oh, look, yeah, I guess I don't relate to my sorry. Zach is a little stressed out. This is the way we're like, I eat peanut butter when I'm stressed. But anyway, it had been a take the jar with you kind of day. So I grabbed the fake peanut butter and a clean spoon. I took the silver phone off the charger next to Dad's bed. He wouldn't be home for work for at least another hour. Sitting on the edge of the unmade bed. Well, I don't see that there's a part. I don't remember what we were going to talk about on this page, but I do know like you can stalk. You can find things like, what about that afternoon at the very beginning? That afternoon is set off with a comma. That's not a clause, but that afternoon is a transition that's set off with a comma at the beginning of that little read aloud. You can find as you read. Do you see the message comes to you? Oh, I could use that to teach this. It doesn't matter what book it is. I mean, thank you for putting up Dela Cruz because that's exciting for me and I'm excited to see it. But it can be any book because they will reveal patterns of power. And my number one secret is that I find them in leads. Leads are the best place to look because writers spend such a long amount of time getting that lead just right. And they really want to grab a reader, and they're usually provocative in some terms, and in some sense. And when you use them, you tease kids into the book, and so they want to read it.
I love that, and I think it's so important. That's one of the things we talked about again. Is that finding examples everywhere and anywhere, and it's not about the list. And oftentimes I know teachers will ask, oh, well, do you have a book list that has blah, blah, blah? And of course I love to share lists, but it's just as an idea to get people thinking about how you can pull any book off the shelf, right, get started, and then looking with that lens and being so purposeful and, you know, what it is that we're trying to teach our kids, and then also turning that over to the kids and saying, you come to us with text that you found and what you noticed and what you shared, and then that becomes part of, you know, our toolbox. So it's not having the one set list. It's about finding and looking through that lens, being purposeful in finding, you know, examples anywhere.
Well, and kids do find better examples sometimes. And what's fun is some people feel like a failure because my kid comes up and says, "Look, I found a serial comma," and it's really a positive set off with two commas in the middle of a sentence. And they feel like, oh, they obviously didn't get what it is. But part of understanding a concept is kind of seeing what it is and what it isn't. And when you can talk them through that appositive and show them what the appositive is actually doing and how, yeah, there are two commas, you actually have figured out that their pseudo-concept was, like a Vygotsky pseudo-concept was, that any sentence with two commas in it, you thought they were at a level of understanding that they understood it was a list of items or a list of actions, but they were really at a level of understanding, which often happens with kids. They take pieces and parts of it. That two commas in a sentence means it's a list, and they just go that quickly. And so now you found out that I can take that kid a little deeper, and we can see how this is, and look how we can figure this out on your own. Is this three things in a row? Is this a list, or is this phrase the crazy teacher renaming Mr. Anderson? In this, was set off with these commas, and then they may not have mastered appositives at that point, but we're going to learn about those in a few weeks. That's one of the reasons you don't teach the pattern of power of appositives and serial comma right on top of each other. But there's that space there for that clarification, because we're not grammar teachers, we're grammar clarifiers. We help them move in that direction. you can never get everybody to know everything all at once, because none of us really know everything all at once. We still have to look things up. Well, I do.
Absolutely. I love that. We are clarifiers too. It goes back to that whole, idea of and helping kids and being facilitators of their learning. And so we're learning from kids, with kids, alongside our kids every day. And I think that's so important.
We're
So
making meaning together, and that's what grammar
exactly.
is, making meaning. Grammar and reading and writing is making meaning together.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you and I had talked about also is I love all of the analogies and the ways that you come up with examples to make it meaningful for kids so that they can make it stick, right? And have that opportunity to take it away and to live with it and to really remember and hold on to that thinking. And so in your work, you talk about how if kids are looking, they can be overwhelmed when teachers ask them to often check for their work for spelling or any other editing issues, and it becomes like insane. And so again, it goes back to that fear factor where kids are afraid. And so one of the things that you talk about is going shopping and making a shopping list and having like a receipt to focus and to look and really get kids to be clear in what they're looking at. So we talked about some of those ideas, and I just want to put up an example, because if you don't know this strategy of Jeff's, I think this is a wonderful takeaway, which I think bridges all of this about finding those chunks and being able to digest and focus. And so I'm going to put up a screen again. Bear with me for a second because I think I got it now, but I had problems. You should be able to see that. Do you see that shopping?
Okay, yeah. So a little bit about the Express Lane edits. One is I know it was a Voices from the Middle article in May of 2007, I think. So you can find that for free online somewhere on the Express Lane edits. It's also in my book, Mechanically Inclined, if you're interested in finding out more about it. Basically, the idea is we try to, usually, I'm not saying that everyone does this, but oftentimes people try to edit for everything all at once, which is a bit overwhelming. So we give them this long checklist, and the kids, of course, put lots of checks on the checklist and staple it to the paper and turn it in. But no errors. They didn't have anything wrong. Or they'll do that crazy thing where they won't capitalize the pronoun I so that they'll have something to fix later. And they know, like, they'll make mistakes on purpose, because to them, how do you fix mistakes that you didn't know already? So in the Express Lane editing, what you do is you remember what you do with the Express Lane. You don't put everything in your basket. You pick one thing, two things. So I'm going to say one or two things is what we want on the Express Lane edit. So then when you look for that, then you name that one thing. We're going to go back, and we're not only going to find places where we used it incorrectly, we're going to find, let's say, capitalizing the pronoun I, the first word of a sentence, and the first word of a direct quotation. All three of those things, we've been focusing on it. We've been studying examples of it. We told you when you turn in this paper, those are three things we're really going to look for. That's an emphasis point for us. Then we go back, we make our little shopping list. I'm going to look for capitalizing the first word of a sentence. I'm going to look for capitalizing the first word of a direct quotation. I'm going to look for capitalizing the pronoun I. If that's what you have on your list, that's all you look for. And everywhere you used an I correctly, everywhere you started a sentence correctly with a capital letter, everywhere that you did any of the things on that list, whatever that list may be, you highlight where you used it correctly. So in this Express Lane editing, you get credit for doing it correctly. So you're already turning editing on its head, because you're saying these things are important, and here's all the times I did it right. Oh, but here's one space where I didn't do it right. I also mark that and make that change, but you're getting credit for both. So it's making them read at a conscious level, raising that conscious level of awareness that David Eagleman was talking about, because we're having this conversation. And for some weird reason, pedagogically, when you zoom in on a few things, they actually work better at finding their own errors and read slower because they're not so overwhelmed. And what happens is sometimes the kids will then find another type of error that's not on the shopping list, and they're like, well, I found this, can I fix this? And you're just like, I guess. I mean, depending on the kids, you can really celebrate it, or sometimes when I taught middle school, you had to act like, well, I guess if you want to. But yeah, of course you can correct anything you see, but that's that beauty of rereading your own writing. That was the whole start of the Express Lane edit, is just to get kids to actually reread their own writing. We've become a nation of first drafters. we love to instant message and tweet, and I'm guilty of it too. I've seen some of my emails and some of my tweets, and I'm like, oh, I should have reread that before I sent it out. I need to do more express lane edits. Just a quick reread will do a lot of work for you and really help you out in this world. And so that's really the basis of it, because there's a silence. Here's our shopping list, and there's a silence where everybody goes in, rereads their writing twice, highlighting every place they use these certain conventions correctly, and then highlighting every place they need to fix. And then really at the end, even the receipt is the metacognition, where we write about, I used I capitalized the letter I because you always capitalize the letter I because I'm important. I mean, whatever they come up with that helps them remember it, that's the express lane edit, the metacognition. And that's the receipt they do after they've noticed everything they've done correctly and fixed things that they needed to fix consciously. So I think we might. I didn't blather. I'm better be quiet for me.
You shared all of your thinking, and I love that, and I appreciate so much you're spending the time in helping us to be more clarifying in our work. And just to kind of recap, I think everything you said goes across all aspects of our teaching, which is metacognition and being intentional and getting kids to be reflective. And so I appreciate your time in sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us, and I look forward to continuing to learn with you and continuing to learn more about Zach and read the next in the series. And I hope everybody, if you haven't had a chance to check out Zach Dela Cruz, you will. And you can follow Jeff on Twitter at RightGuyJeff, or go to his website at rightguy.net. So thank you so much, Jeff. We'll see you at NCC.
And follow JoEllen too.
Unless we didn't reread our tweets first. All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, and enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
So, wow. Thank you, Jeff and JoEllen. That was fantastic. I love the ideas of students and teachers using grammar, reading, and writing to make meaning together. Just fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, follow these guys and see what they're doing next. So I will bring up the schedule for the next session, and I hope to see you at 1 o'clock in one of the other sessions. Thank you so much again, Jeff and JoEllen, and here comes the next session schedule.
Thank you, Camilla. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
I think. Give me a moment. There it is.